And welcome back, Fourth and Long Fits. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter series. As you know, we've hit the off-season. We've got 3 months to get to March before the AFL season starts back. So to keep footy going, I like to talk to supporters. I like to talk to people who are in the know about their club. Today, we have Mr. Ben McKee from South Australia. Ben, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Before we get going at the end of the episode, I have to announce this gentleman works with the Crowjack podcast out of South Australia, a huge, as we'll kind of give away, a huge Crows podcast. So I'm trying to find a way to connect with more podcasts of each of the individual clubs because I think it's a good way to find out what fans think of their club. So we'll discuss the project a little bit later on in the podcast, but let's get right into it, Ben. I like to find out a little bit about the person that I'm talking to. I know this is a footy podcast. We're going to talk a ton of footy the rest of the episode. This is a chance to kind of say who you are, who you're about outside of the game of football.
Yeah, really. Footy does make up a big part of myself, to be perfectly honest. But sport in general is me. If you ask someone what I love, most people would probably tell you pretty swiftly sport and any sort of competitive sport competition or anything like that. Have a beautiful girlfriend. As I said, live in very sunny at the moment, Adelaide, South Australia. Yeah, I'm pretty simple, really. It's sports in my family. That's about it.
You are a man after my own heart, a sport lover myself. So you and we're going to get along really well in this one because I am a sport nut. Most people that know me, I watch sports from around the world, including cricket. Aussie rules, rugby. I get into golf, soccer, hockey, all of that stuff. So I know I feel you on that one. You are a man after my own heart, sir. But let's go to it. We're going to talk about footy. So I want to go into you. What's your favorite thing about the sport of footy?
I think just the way that the sport can bring people together is the real number one thing for me. I think a good example would be, well, we've just seen it in the most previous season when the Crows defeated Port after the siren when Jordan Dawson kicked the goal. And I'm sorry to bring him up for you. I know you're a bit of a Sydney man. But for me, I was there that night on the hill end of Adelaide Oval, and I think I hugged and high-fived and I don't think I kissed anyone, but I was definitely got around a lot more people on the hill than I would in any other setting. And just the feeling of everyone coming together and celebrating is quite amazing.
Awesome, awesome. I absolutely love that. And don't worry about it. My thing, the biggest thing is with Dawson is as long if he leaves the Crows and leaves the Swans, I want him to go somewhere where he's going to enjoy his football and be able to play the type of footy that he did. As interesting as the trade was, and we can discuss that a little bit later too. I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he got to go home. He's able to be successful where he is. So absolutely no issues there. So I want you to dive back into your mind a little bit. Dive back into those early years. Can you remember your earliest footballing memory?
There's a couple. So probably the first time attending, my whole life I've watched it. There's no question about that. So you can just pinpoint any sort of game from very, very early 2000s and I would probably be watching it as a little fella. But in terms of attending, I attended a NAB Cup game which is like a pre-season competition. It's been called many, many different things during the years. But probably 2002 or 2003, actually against Sydney as well, because my cousin and uncle support Sydney. So I probably would have been about 4, I think. And I remember going to Amy Stadium, which was the old oval where footy was played in Adelaide. And that was probably my first experience live at a footy game. I can't remember who won or anything like that, but I remember that was my first live experience of footy.
Fantastic, fantastic. And if the podcast doesn't give it away, we'll say it here. You were a huge Crows man. There's no doubt about it. Bleeding the tricolors. But how did you become to support it? I know you're in SA, so many people think, well, he's in South Australia. But is there a specific reason why you became a supporter of the Adelaide Crows?
It's a bit of an interesting one. So the stock standard, my mum and dad were Crows fans right from the very start in 1990 when they came in, somewhat controversially. So my dad was a Port Adelaide Magpies fan. at
Mhm.
the time. So he jumped on the Crows when they joined the AFL. And despite what Port fans will tell you, they're two separate clubs, and I will hold my hat on that. So we supported the Magpies all the way through until 2011 or 2012 when they came out with the whole one club thing. Basically, the Power were going broke and needed some more money, but we won't go into that. So yeah, that it was really the family ties, and it's gone from there, and it's blossomed into a love, really.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I know as like again, SA with Port and Adelaide, there's fighting words in between the two. You said again, mom and dad again started off as Port Magpies and then became Adelaide Crow supporters. Is there
Yeah.
anybody in the family that are Port supporters are different? And how interesting is the dynamic when it comes to their club and your club playing?
Yes, I think in South Australia, it's a very, very interesting dynamic. So obviously the Crows came into the league in 1990, and Port really wanted to get into the league at the same time and went behind the back of the SANFL, didn't get the license. It was a whole big schmozzle, but then they ended up getting an AFL license in 1996. So my uncle is a very interesting person in the sense where he went for the Crows for the first 6 years, was also a Port Magpies fan. Then when the Power came into the league, he said, well, I'm going to go and follow the Power. So he supported the Crows for the first little bit and then jumped on. So yeah, if we're at a family event and the footy's on between the two teams, it's a little bit interesting, but still family at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I understand it. And the funny thing is I remember my first series that I did last year. It was actually the most interesting one that I had was my Port supporter because his entire family is Adelaide Crow supporters. He's the only Port supporter in the entire family. He just decided to be the rebel and picked the Port. And him and his brother, the animosity, he jokes, he says, if you didn't know we were related, he said, you'd think we hated each other when we go to the footy because the banter is ridiculous. So it's always interesting to see the family dynamic, especially in SA, where you have that love-hate relationship between Port and Adelaide. So absolutely awesome. So that is absolutely fantastic. So we jump from there. Let's go to this first club item that you ever bought or received.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think it would probably be when I was quite young, 3 or 4 would have been my first Guernsey, I think. It would have been one that definitely doesn't go anywhere near fitting me anymore. I think it might have been an away Guernsey from 2003, and had the number 7 on the back, who was Nigel Smart, a dual premiership player for the Crows. Had a bald head. I think that's what drew me to him. He had his shiny head and it made him stick out on the field. But yeah, that would have been my first item, I think. The 02 or 03 away Guernsey with the big crow in the middle, 7 on the back. That would probably be the first, I think.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, I think I know the answer to this next question just because again, you have your own podcast again, but I love hearing people describe how they fan or their fandom. I love hearing people describe it because everybody's is different. Again, I've heard some people say die hard is a negative connotation. So I love hearing people explain this. Describe to me your fandom of the Adelaide Crows.
Oh, yeah, Die Hard would be the closest explanation or a description I think I would come up with. Albeit not quite as much as one of my fellow project members, Leighton, but I collect a lot of the Guernseys, a lot of the memorabilia. I get to games 2 hours early. I go to every home game possible, try and travel to as many away ones as possible. So it's an obsession, maybe. If Die Hard isn't a word that people want to roll with, obsession might be the one to go with, and it's definitely that. As I stand in front of my a little mural here, really. I've got Guernseys and bobbleheads and calendars and cards and beanies and all sorts of stuff.
Yep. And that's kind of the crazy thing about that. Sorry, I'm trying. I have somebody that's tried to hop onto our Zoom. It was kind of threw me off just the tiniest little bit there. So after the fandom, can you remember the first Crows game that you ever attended?
Other than that preseason one that I mentioned before, the clearest memory that I have from attending a game would be the 2005 preliminary final against the West Coast Eagles, or the 2006. I know we played them both years. One was at home, one was away. So I think it was the 2006 one actually, where we played West Coast at home, up by about 5 goals at halftime and fell apart in the second half. Ben Cousins turned into the Terminator and Superman, and Daniel Kerr looked incredible, and we had our hearts broken on that occasion. But that would probably be the first clear one. I can remember lining up to buy tickets, going on the day, being quite happy at halftime, and leaving not so happy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's always kind of the way it goes. So, my next question that I love asking this question because it's always fun because it makes people think a little bit, and I compare it to being a parent and having to pick your favorite child. Can you pick your favorite player of the past and your favorite player currently on the Crows list?
Of the past, it is quite hard, but I think Eddie Betts would probably be my favorite, and I'm sure there are many other Crows and well footy fans in general who would probably say the same thing. He gave me some absolutely incredible memories at the Adelaide Oval between 2014 and 2019. So he would have to be my favorite Crow of all time, I think. Just even off the field, you would go to open training sessions and just his personality and vibrant. He had all the time in the world for the fans. He was just a fantastic player all around.
Yeah, Eddie was fantastic. One of those you'll never ever forget what he did, and the fact that you had a pocket named after him, and so many
Yeah.
outstanding goals in the Eddie Betts pocket. Absolutely agree with that. Do you have one in the present Crows, or is it kind of hard with knowing most of the club right now?
It, it is tough, but I would probably say that Darcy Fogarty is my favourite. Ever since he got drafted, really, he took on the 32 of Mark Rashuda back in the day. He's a very similar build. For the first few years, it might have looked like that he wouldn't fill in that potential and might have been a bit of a bust. But I think, especially towards the second half of last year, he's starting to really flourish and hopefully getting ready to take over that number one key forward spot when Taylor Walker finally, retires, which is probably going to be this year or next year. As much as I'd love to see him run around forever.
Yeah, I can understand it. Taylor Walker's great, but I think he really stepped up this year. I think he's a hell of a one to latch on to right now. So I always love this. I always love this next one because I think it's great to see the sparkle in their eyes when they think about it. Most memorable moment as a Crow supporter so far.
There are absolutely a couple. Honourable mention to the 2015 second showdown after Phil Walsh was unfortunately passed away, and not necessarily for the footy game, but it was very odd that day. We were walking to the Adelaide Oval, the Crows and the Port fans, there was no animosity,
Mhm.
which is incredibly rare. Like you would expect not fights at the start of the day, maybe towards the end of the day, but on the way in, you have a bit of banter back and forth. But that day there was none of it. It was people walking hand in hand, arm in arm to the Adelaide Oval, and I actually just got goosebumps thinking about it just then because it was an incredible day. But my favourite memory would probably be the 2017 preliminary final. So I I'm 24 and I was 2 months old when the Crows won their last premiership. So I can't say I have very clear memories of that time. And going into that prelim, it sort of felt like that might have been, we would finally get one. Obviously, the next week didn't pan out exactly how we thought it would, but the final siren at the preliminary final was special. It was a feeling that I've never felt before, since, and I hope to feel it again soon.
Yeah, and that's one of those. It's one of those things. Again, this year with the Swans, it's like that when that preliminary final, the siren goes off, and you're on to the grand final. You have a chance to win a premiership. There
Yeah.
is no way to describe the emotions that run through you at that time. So we'll go to it. This isn't always as fun for some clubs this year. Thoughts on this last season for the Crows, because it was one of those, maybe it was me. I kind of thought I could see some progression this season. Do you feel that you got better this year from the previous seasons, or was this one of those frustrating years because the progress wasn't where you thought it would be?
No, absolutely. I do think we've progressed significantly in the last year, and I think it was a fun season to watch as a supporter. We didn't we weren't a great side and we weren't winning every game or competitive necessarily in every single game, but I feel like we had games like a game in Carlton that we won the first showdown. We were competitive against Collingwood at the Adelaide Oval and went down by a goal. But I think, granted, it was a low bar from 2020, so anything would look pretty good at this stage. But I see it as a good year, and players like Fogarty, like we mentioned a moment ago, sort of really grabbing a hold of their position, and midfielders like Schoenberg and Berry and the young kids that are the rebuild that we're going through at the moment are really starting to flourish and become good players. So whilst win-loss record, we look at it and we go, okay, maybe we weren't as good as what we thought, it was still a really good year. And you can see the progression through the club, and something hopefully that we continue on into this year and that trajectory keeps going up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the building blocks are there to be very interesting, and I think it's a great transition for me. Is that my next question is the off season. I mean, how what are your thoughts on this? I mean, because you have a podcast, you got to talk about the off season moves, the pickups. I mean, Isaac Rankin finds his way back to South Australia. That's going to be in the tricolors next year. How excited were you for some of these off-season moves, or were you interested on the Isaac Rankin move? Because I know there are some people in Crows Nation that were a little iffy about Isaac joining the Crows.
Yeah, personally, I was very, very excited. So he was someone who I've watched, quite a while, since before he was drafted, really. We had the season before he was drafted, there was a bit of a joke going around on Twitter where before the start of the season, we used to hashtag tanking for Rankin, to try and pick him up.
Uh-huh.
He's a great talent. And I think obviously a very high price tag, but Gold Coast weren't going to let him go for cheap. And I think he's an important piece for what we're looking to do. Him, Rochelle, Walker, Fogarty in a forward line is going to be, not to toot our own horn, but probably will end up being one of the best forward lines in the comp this year. So I think he's a really great addition to the squad. I'm not overly worried with what we paid with the draft picks and how much we're paying him, because I think he'll be worth it if he can fulfill his potential. And I suppose that's the key thing. Maybe ask in 5 years and we'll know was it a good deal or not. But at this stage, it's just hoping and praying that he is what we think he's going to be, and will assist in that forward line.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I'm going to broach a subject, and some people may think this is very, very interesting, but I want to go to draft night. Were you a little miffed at Kinnear Beatson and the Swans for throwing the bid on your father and son a little bit earlier than I think some people expected? And is it one of those? Do you think this was fair game, or do you think this is a little bit of dirty pool?
Oh, a fair game, absolutely. I think if a team can see that there is something that would detrimentally affect the draft position or another one, and it would positively affect their own, why not? We saw it with the Crows when 2020, 2021, I think it was, when we bidded on the Western Bulldogs pick number 1 when we picked up Phil Thorpe. It's been that long since footy. I can't remember his name. Jamaro, that's the one.
Yep.
But then we saw later down the pick that then took away some points from the Bulldogs, so we could pick up Jimmy Rowe. Obviously, he's just been delisted. But at the time, you look at it in a strategic movement and go, well, why would we bid on pick number 1 when we know that the Bulldogs are going to take him anyway? Well, it's opened up pick 38 or whatever it was that we picked up Jimmy with. So absolutely fair game. And honestly, I don't think some of the Swans were happy with the way that the Crows went about a bit of hardball with Dawson the year before. So, all's fair in love and war, and good payback, really.
Well, and I've seen that kind of banter between the two, and I've heard that, and I'm one of those where it's like, it is kind of you're playing with fire a little bit. I mean, Kinnear Beatson had an interview, and again, can you grain of salt what he says? He was like, he had seen the GWS kid that they had bid on, said we saw him as a guy we wanted, and then the Crows kid, he was a guy we really liked, that we were really high on. Do you take him fully on his word? Again, is it game? I don't know, but I thought it was fascinating that some people got their feathers really, really ruffled, and I'm like, well, but then the thing though is I agree with what somebody said on Twitter one time. It's like, Sydney's got 2 academy kids next season. You know somebody's going to do something to Sydney next year. So it's like you got to be careful who you ruffle your feathers with because it could come back to bite you the next year. Kind of
Yeah,
AKA what you would say is the Dawson trade. There were some Smuds fans that were thinking that the Crows knew they were going to get Dawson no matter what. So they kind of bluffed the Swans into eventually moving him. And the
mm,
Swans could be angry, but the Crows had a little bit more leeway than I think the Swans wanted to give them credit for. And again,
yeah,
I agree. You got to do what's best for your club. 100% understand it. So I
yeah,
the back and forth was kind of funny to me. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. So I had to ask that question since I had you on here because I had to see what you thought on that one. So we'll jump to it. We're getting closer again. We're in January. We're only a couple months away. The teams are starting preseason training and late trainings after the Christmas break. So I hate saying expectations because there comes that little I expect this to happen. I'm one of those. I want something to happen, but I don't expect it. What are your thoughts for
yeah.
next season? Do you have expectations? Or are you one of those you hope, but you're not going to put expectation next to it?
Yeah, it's a tough one because expectations in an ideal world are what we would look towards, but there are many things that could happen. If touch wood, if we go out in round one and Dusty Fogarty breaks his leg and Rochelle breaks his leg and we get a whole bunch of injuries, then all of a sudden your expectations go right out the window and you need to reset. So ideally, what I would be hoping for is just progression on last year and continuing to look towards a finals spot. I don't think we're quite at the stage where we'll be in the finals just yet, but somewhere from that 8 to 12 mark on the ladder would be around about where I think we'll be and what we would be aiming for.
Awesome, awesome. And I don't normally ask this question, but I'm really interested. Coach Nix, do you like the way he's kind of handled things? I mean, it's been kind of very interesting his addition to the club. Is he
Mm.
who you think is going to take you to the next level?
He seems to be someone who's built a really great culture within the four walls of the club, and I think that is a very important element of being successful as a club. We've seen issues that the Crows have had off field previously that have led to some not great culture within the four walls. And I think he was handed a bit of a mess, and the club basically said, "Go and fix this up for us." And he seems to be the right guy for the job. The boys seem connected really well as a group and are rolling along nicely. A lot of people have questioned his game plan in the first couple of years, saying, "Oh, you've only won a certain amount of games." But realistically, with what he inherited, I don't think Alistair Clarkson would be doing much more with the group that he initially inherited. So I think he's doing a great job at the helm, and as long as he's given the chance, some of our supporters are pretty quick to jump on the hashtag SackNix bandwagon after a couple of losses. But I think you get that everywhere. So hopefully he's given his chance, and I think he would be the one to, continue the upward trajectory that we're going on at the moment.
Well, staying in SA, I mean, I think it's just as interesting on the other side of town with Port Adelaide with Hinkley. I mean, it's very
Mm,
fascinating. I listened to the Rush Hour in SA, and the back and forth about both coaches is very interesting to me because it's very much there's some vitriol towards some of these coaches as the season
oh
went
yeah,
on. So it was very fascinating to see. So I think you're coaching wise, I think the Adelaide Crows fan base is a little happier with Nix than Hinkley. I think Hinkley's really on a very, very warm seat going into this season.
yeah,
Last season, I think he had an absolute shit storm hit him last year with all the injuries and in the absolutely atrocious start. So I'm very interested to see where I think the Crows have had progression these last couple of years. And I think having Fogarty step up this year, the interesting thing will be is how does Sloan come back? Where does he play? And some of the
mm,
interesting things there for the Crows because there's a lot of moving parts. Does Dawson go to the wing? Does he stay at the halfback, do the half like center halfback or halfback flank positions where you can use his elite kicking? There's a lot of moving parts with the Crows. So I think if Nix can find that right pattern and his youngsters like Rochelle and them start to really go, you've got a lot of really good pieces there. I think the Crows are going to be a fascinating one this season, especially
Mm.
when I think there's 14 teams that can make finals this year. That's how crazy this season could be. So a team like the Crows, the Hawks, the Giants, the Bombers, the Roos could really make or break the finals this year with how they do in the bottom part, how they do in their part of the ladder. So it'd be fascinating. So I'm gonna have some fun with this next one. I love this question because it always makes people think. I'm going to install you as the men's list manager. All 17 teams are completely open. You can bring in any player, one player from the entire 17, from all the other 17 clubs. Who's the one player you bring to the Crows and why?
Ooh, that is a tough one. A bit of thought we'll have to go into this, I think. Um, for what we need, I think it would be an elite midfielder and someone with pace to go through the middle. I think we really lack that. Mm.
So many to choose from in that position.
It is very true. I wouldn't mind, say, a Paddy Cripps or a Sam Walsh or someone in that upper echelon of midfielders. Now, Paddy Cripps and Sam Walsh probably aren't the two best examples for speedy midfielders, but they get the job done. Um, oh, that's a really tough one. Mm, we'll switch it up. I'll change it to Clayton Oliver. Clayton Oliver would be my one, just the ball through the middle. Um, yeah, got a bit of pace under his belt and can, be the A grade midfielder to put the ball straight on Taylor Walker's chest and Dusty Fogarty's chest and really be the link between the defense and the forward line.
Not a bad one. Marcus Bontempelli would be another one. I think it'd be interesting to put in that midfield with Keys and Laird and some of those youngsters there.
Mm.
So I like it. I like it. So we're actually going to go. My next one is really fascinating because the AFL decided that the NRL has a great idea. They want to steal Magic Round and call it Gather Round. And with the fact that you are in SA, the tournament or the round is in SA. How excited are you for the Gather Round again? Whether the name has much to stick on, we'll leave that to the side. But how excited is SA to host this very unique round of footy?
Yeah, look, the name definitely doesn't leave much to be desired. They could have gone with a little bit more thought into that one,
At least they
but
didn't just go Magic Round. That was the one thing I was like, if they call it Magic Round, I'm just gonna be like, oh, I mean, face palm so bad.
yeah, but honestly, when it was first announced, I wasn't really that keen for it because I didn't really think about it too much. I know we discussed on our pod a little bit that we were, why are we throwing money towards this? All we really care about is the Crows. But now that it's sort of getting closer, and as the sports lover I am, I'm going, hold on, there's 9 games of footy the same weekend within my state. I bought they have like a pass where you can go to all the games at the Adelaide Oval. So I'll be looking to attend 6 games in 4 days. So, I'm very excited for it. You get to see a few different teams, your Carltons, your Collingwoods, your bigger Victorian teams that don't necessarily always travel here. It'll be exciting to have all the teams in the one place. And I think as we approach it a little bit more, a bit more buzz will start to come around the city. I know a lot of the tickets sold out very quickly. So yeah, it's very exciting for me as a footy lover. It'll be a great weekend.
Yeah, I'm very much looking into it, and the fact that it's going to be a 23 game season this year will be fascinating to see how they work that out. So, we'll go from the SA to my favorite, one of my favorite questions, because in 2020 and 2021, the grand final saw itself outside of Victorian soil at the GABA and at the at this Optus Oval. So I'm one of those. I was surprised at how many media members started bringing up the fact that the Super Bowl over here in the States is a traveling championship game. It's never in the same stadium. It's always moving. So they brought up kind of this topic of, would it be better for the grand final to be a traveling grand final, say almost a home team, or let's pick the Adelaide Oval for 2027 and then 4 years later have it at the SCG or something like that. So your thoughts on that? Because again, SA was another one of those that they talked about potentially doing 2020 or 2021 as a grand final. Do you like that thought, or are you one of those that's like, I like the grand final at the MCG because it's a little bit of keeping the tradition of the AFL VFL?
Yeah, I'm very much split up the middle. As a very proud South Australian, we have a bit of a rivalry with Victoria, and it's sort of a bit like Victoria gets everything, blah blah blah. And as a Crows fan, having gone through 2017, I'm not sure we lose by 10 goals in the grand final if it's at a neutral venue. So I can see the argument for it. But also, as someone who's attended a grand final at the MCG, it is the most incredible experience. 100,000 people. You know, the MCG is by far, not by far anymore. Optus is pretty close to the same size, but it's just an incredible stadium and an incredible experience. And like you said, keeping tradition for however many years previously, I'm very split up the middle where it would be really cool to have a grand final at the Adelaide Oval, but I just don't think it would be the same. Like, unless we get to a point where every state or a few states have 100,000 seat stadium and we know it's going to be filled, okay, we can look at it then. But as it stands right now, I think the MCG is the obvious choice. That there's just nothing like it. I was fortunate enough to go in 2018 when she did his goal to St. Collingwood, and nothing like it. It's just incredible. The stadium, sure, the MCG isn't so good when it's, you know, a random Saturday afternoon and there's only 25,000 people there. It's a bit of a cauldron, but grand final day is like no other. And Melbourne does it so.
Yeah, and it's one of those, again, the MCC has that 50-year contract, so it's a little bit of pie in the sky. But I was fascinated by how many Victorian media members actually brought this topic up, and
Mm,
a few of them were like they kind of liked the idea because it did kind of, it evened the comp out, because I think there's the discussion of the Vic media bias and the Vic bias to the 10 teams that are in Victoria, and the AFL being the VFL base with other teams joining them. So it's
yeah.
always interesting to hear people's discussions on that. Like, you can tell the Melburnians, they're like, no, it's got to be here. And then you can tell the out of states, they're some of them are, I like it there. Some of them are like, I wouldn't mind it, but I'm not gonna. I mean, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So it's a very interesting topic. I just like bringing it up because it's the passion sometimes by especially the Victorians and Melburnians is classic. I absolutely love it, but I appreciate it. But I appreciate because they love that. It's the same thing with the time frame. Like, we had the discussion. Like, the discussion went wild this year. Like, I went on Twitter and I had several people very angry with me when I said I honestly see the grand final eventually moving to a Twilight grand final,
Mm,
because TV ratings are higher the later you play them. It doesn't matter what sport it is. Don't tell me about tradition. More people are going to watch the later it is on a Saturday. I understand. Everybody's
yeah.
like, well, then you can't celebrate. Well, okay, you can't celebrate. What's that to a TV exec who wants 3.5 million viewers compared to 1.2 in a 2:30 time slot? So I ask you,
Yeah.
does the time frame really go for you? Because for me, I kind of get the feeling that I think Victorians are really like 2:30, 2:30, 2:30, 2:30.
Yeah.
The outer states, SA, WA, New South Wales, Queensland, they really don't give a shit.
Yeah. Again, I'm probably a little bit split down the middle because I love my tradition. I love that it's in the middle of the afternoon, and I can see the benefits of, you know, if you have a night grand final when we start drinking at 10 a.m., because, you know, we're all knocked out by the time the game starts. So
Nope.
it's
And I get that
really,
argument too.
yeah, but really, it doesn't make any difference to me, honestly. It's a grand final. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, if my team's playing in a grand final, I couldn't care if you're starting it at 3 a.m., you're starting it at 10 a.m., middle of the day, middle of the night, whenever you start it. I'm going to be watching the grand final regardless. So start it whenever you want. Honestly, it's I'm happy either way.
100% agree. My favorite thing is, well, what if kids want to watch? And I go, well, here's the thing that I say, and this is on, maybe it's because, I mean, look at the US. Do you think that the Super Bowl people care about kids? The game starts at prime time, 7 p.m. our time. The
Mm,
game's halftime is an hour and a half long at times. The game isn't ending till close to midnight, and sometimes 1 a.m. if it's in the Eastern time zone. So
yeah.
I understand the arguments, and again, the AFL is much different. It's not a conglomerate that is the NFL over here. So I know it's a little bit of apples and banana. I mean, it is a completely different kettle of fish. But
Mm,
you also play the grand final on Saturday, so you have Sunday to recover. Unlike
yeah.
us, wacky Americans that we play it on a Sunday, and then people have to go to work the next day on Monday morning. So
Yeah,
it's
and with it
yeah,
over here as well, Victoria actually get a public holiday on the Friday
yep.
beforehand as well, so they've got plenty of time.
Yeah, they can build up into it. It's very interesting topic to go through, and I love it because, like I said, it's the passion is absolutely fascinating. So I've listened to your guys' podcast. Thought it was absolutely fantastic. I'm planning on keeping subscribed to it, listening to it this season to get your guys' thoughts on it. So I know you guys covered the AFLW. So what are your
Mm.
thoughts on the league as a whole? And then thoughts on this last season for the Crows, because again, the Crows are the dynasty really of the AFLW with 3 premierships and 7 seasons. Thoughts on this last season for the Crows, falling just a tiny bit short of where they're usually at the end of the AFLW season.
Yeah, I think the team sort of ran out of steam a little bit. You know, we've been through, yeah, as you said, season 7. I think we played in 4 or 5 of the grand finals so far. So, you know, we've had a long stretch of success, and in a team and a league where we're slowly getting to an even competition. You know, you still do have your 3 or 4 teams who are a little bit ahead of the pack, but the competition is definitely starting to even up. So you can't expect to be a team that's going to win grand finals or be in grand finals every season. And Melbourne and Brisbane were 2 great teams this year, and I think we just weren't quite to the same standard as they were. You know, injuries to Chelsea Randall and a couple of the other key pieces certainly didn't help, but yeah, we were just not quite up to it in that second season. And I think just ran out of steam. I think you saw it during the regular season where games against, I think, Richmond, where we very really should have lost that game. And there are a few other close games to teams where you wouldn't expect us to be, you know, within a goal or 2 of them, and they were really pushing us, and some beat us. And it just wasn't our season, I don't think. And it was good to see the league is, yeah, becoming more even and a bit more diverse in the results. And, you know, it's not just going to be, there's these 2 teams who are going to kill every other team, and the other teams are, you know, making up the numbers. So it's really good to see that the league is getting better.
Awesome. And then the fact that this year you had the first ever showdown in the AFL women's, which I mean, as a Crow supporter, you probably chuckled a little bit with how handily the Crows girls handled Port Adelaide. Did you get a chance to go to that game, or did you have to watch that on television?
Yeah, certainly was. I was there. It was a glorious evening, to be honest. A lot of build up from the Port fans, and thought they were going to roll in. And yeah, I don't know, for some reason thought that even though they'd been pumped the week before by West Coast, maybe, I think they thought they were going to beat us. They didn't. They didn't. But yeah, it was a fantastic game. So it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it was great to see, and I loved that the Port fans did never tear us apart. I mean, they really kind of made it a showdown, which I thought was fantastic. Again, was the
Mm,
game showdown worthy? Well, that's up for debate, but it was great to see South Australia be able to support women's footy and I have to give it the Port fans at Alberton Oval were fantastic this year. And
yeah,
again, in Adelaide, it's always been great out at Norwood Oval. You've always supported the women. So I have to say, SA, the fans in SA have been absolutely fantastic for women's footy. So I tip my hat to you guys there because I think you guys have really, really latched on to the women's footy and have really, really supported it. That's great. So we'll stay with
mm.
the AFLW for one last question. Do you have a favorite player on the AFLW roster for the Crows?
I'm a little bit biased because I did play primary school football with Eloise Jones.
Mhm.
So she's absolutely my favourite with a little bit of bias. If I had to pick one of the other ones, I would probably say Ebony Marinoff. She's been fantastic since she was drafted in the first season and really become one of the better players of the AFLW competition. So Noffy and Eloise are probably my 2 favourites.
Yeah, not a bad one. Ebony Marinoff and Eloise Jones, 2 really good players there. So hard to argue with you on that. So we
Absolutely.
come towards some of my ending questions. And again, I've said this in a few of my podcasts. I have never been to Australia. I want to. It is on my bucket list. It is on my thing to do list. I have to get there. I have to see some footy there because as much as I love watching it on my tiny little iPad at 2 in the morning, it's not the same as being at the ground. So I'm going to ask a few questions to do some research for when I go. I'm ready for this. What is your
Yeah.
go-to food when you go to the footy?
The Adelaide Oval previously made an incredibly good chicken burger, but they've changed their recipe in the last few years. So stay away from the chicken burgers now. I don't think they're as good as they used to be.
Okay.
Um, I don't want to give you the stock standard pie answer because I feel like everyone would be giving that.
It's
Um,
surprisingly not as it's popular. It tends to be the most popular answer, but it's not as popular as you would think. I've had hot chips. I don't eat at the footy. I'm too nervous. I can only have a coffee. I've had jam donuts. I think the Port Adelaide guy said there's like an Indian stand that's actually at the
mm,
Adelaide Oval that he absolutely adores. Says he has to get it whenever he goes. So I've heard a little bit of everything, but yeah, I think that the most common answer has been the pie, and it's hard to not to argue a beer and a pie. I mean, it's kind of perfect for the footy.
yeah, absolutely. Certainly a beer would be in my left hand, probably a box of chips in my right, and then
Okay.
we fill in the gap from there, whether it's a hot dog or a pie or some sort of burger. You can't go wrong, really.
Yeah, I mean I don't think there's any bad thing as long as it's something you enjoy. So we go to the next one. If you had your ideal place to sit, where's your ideal seat to watch the footy?
So the Adelaide Oval is very unique in the sense that we have the hill at one end,
Hmm.
which for me is where I went every game. I have a group of about 10 to 15 friends who all go to every game and we all congregate on the hill. You probably would have seen on Twitter at the second showdown that didn't end so well. And a little bit gross, but in terms of viewpoint, I love center wing or maybe first level or second level view wise, but in terms of getting around the people and the atmosphere of the game, I love the hill at the Adelaide.
Fantastic. That's absolutely great. Have you been to either MCG, Marvel, any of those stadiums?
Yeah, so I've been to the G, been to Marvel, and then yeah, a few of the AFLW grounds. But yeah, in terms of the men's, yeah, MCG and Marvel, I've been to. Love the MCG. Granted, the time I went there was a 2018 grand final, when the other time was, I think,
Mhm.
round two, 2017. I think the Crows played Hawthorn, and there were about 25,000 people in it, and it becomes not quite as spectacular when it isn't full, but still great. The history of the ground and walking around the outside and just the inner city of Melbourne is really nice. I like Marvel. A lot of people rag on Marvel and say that it's not very good, but I enjoy the experience at Marvel. Um, yeah, that's about it at this stage. I am planning to go to Perth. I do really want to see the Optus Stadium at some stage, and yeah, get to plenty of other grounds. But at this stage, MCG and Marvel are the two that I've done. Oh, sorry,
Awesome.
and Ballarat. I went to Ballarat too, but that's not really notable.
I think it depends on when you go. Everything that I hear, it depends on when you go, if it's enjoyable or not. So, all righty, we jump one of the last questions that I have each time. And again, I love this question because it's very interesting to see the differentiation. What is your favorite game of footy you have ever seen live on TV? Doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you've ever seen?
um, for personal reasons, I would say the 2017 preliminary final for very obvious reasons. But in terms of the actual game, um, yeah, there have been a few that we've been in that have been really good. Um, I'll roll with the first showdown from this year. It's up there, top three best games that I've been to and watched. So, to come from 3 or 4 goals down with 6 minutes to go, to win after the siren, the drama of Murphy being injured. We'll put that in quotation marks because I don't know if he actually was, but
I think he
um,
got clotheslined if he wasn't injured. He could.
yeah, he got hit in the
It
side of
was
the
it was a
body. He
pretty
sold it
wicked
very
one.
well. Yeah. But yeah, we'll go with that one. Anytime you beat your crosstown rival after the siren, it's incredible. So yeah, we'll go with that one.
Yeah, hard not to argue with that one. You're gonna make many of friends when that goes through for sure, for sure. So, I mean, that's gonna do it for my questions. But I want to give you this. I want to give you this opportunity to end again. You have your own podcast. You're part of the podcast, the Crowjack Project, about the Crows. I want to let you talk a little bit about it for anybody that might be listening to my show that's a Crows fan that doesn't know about it, so then they can check you guys out because I'm not a Crows fan, but I thoroughly have enjoyed all the episodes that I've heard. I think you guys have a nice balance, some comedy in there, which I cracked up. I heard one of your compilation shows were some of your best of the year, and I couldn't stop I was literally working at the time and I could not stop laughing. You guys were absolutely hilarious.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we have probably 5 or 6 of us, I think, who we sort of rotate through different episodes depending on our availability and just to give it a bit of a mix up. But yeah, we talk all things Crows, not overly like we seriously, like we discuss the serious stuff, but we like to take a light-hearted approach to it and be a bit more of a, you know, like a talking with friends around the table and having a bit of a laugh. We've also got our Go Crom beanies of one that I've modelled here. So yeah, we've raised I think 25,000 for charity through the Crom beanies and the garden stakes Guernseys that we've got. So very proud to have done that. And yeah, we're really everything Crows we'll cover on. We have a show called the Obscure Crow, which is where we pick a random player from the past who supporters have more than likely forgotten about, or they had one good game and didn't do much else, and we do a bit of a profile of them. So that's pretty fun. Yeah, anything and everything Crows will cover.
Fantastic. And that's great. And like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, I'm not a Crows fan, but I thought the show was fantastic. I cannot wait for your shows this season. And like I said, if you ever want to if you ever want to chat with an American that knows footy a little bit, reach out. I would love to hop on the show because I think you guys have an absolutely awesome podcast for sure.
Thank you. We'll absolutely take you up on that offer.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that is going to do it for our episode today. Again, Ben, this has been fantastic hopping on with you. It's great to see another podcaster that thoroughly enjoys it. And again, as an American, I don't have as many people that are super as passionate about the sport as yourself and many of the Australians that I run into. There's a few of us. There are overall, I'm not sure how you know it. There are 4 podcasts over here in the States that are Americans that do footy. There's a gentleman out of Ohio, Craig Wessels, a young lady out of New York, Rosanna, who is the AFL Obsessed podcast. Craig's is a Yank on the Footy. And then there's 2 brothers out of California. I think it's Americans Watching Footy, I think is the name of their podcast. So, and then myself with Fourth and Long, which I also do the Donnie's Disposal series. So us 4 are kind of the 4 podcasts right now that I am fully aware of that are Americans that cover the footy. We're trying to help spread the love of footy over here because I think it's a fantastic sport. And I think it's worth sharing because I think it brings people together in a different way than many of the American sports here. And you get more
Mm.
people. I mean, you can have up to 36 players on the field. So even more the merrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
All righty. So I think that is going to do it for our episode. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Ben, thank you very much for hopping on. That's going to do it for us. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen. More episodes are dropping. And remember, I'm also doing chats with Waffle and Sandful supporters as well. I'm working on some VFL connections to maybe get some VFL independent clubs, not the Box Hill and the Casey's, more like the Coburgs, some of the ones that are independent from the AFL clubs to get that state league chat because I think I want to learn a little bit more about some of these state league clubs because I think they have great histories and they've produced some great players. So I'd love to find out about that. So keep an eye out on that. More are coming. That will do it for our episode, and we will be back again very soon.